welcome to another edition of the Bear Down Chicago podcast with your hosts, Ryan Dangle.
You picked a tie? What are we in
True.
Europe? Like what?
I'm sorry.
Soccer?
Ties happen in the NFL, man.
They're called draws, right? Yeah, no, dude. Why? Why are we doing? No, absolutely not. All right. Well, you got to keep your own record now because I don't have a tie column. I got a win-loss column.
Patrick Sheldon.
I say that because the flashlight emanating and beaming from the steaming pile of as today's game is David Montgomery. He is the flashlight in my pile of poop.
Brendan Shagrew.
So our buddy Brendan, who writes for USA Today, I have always screwed up his last name. Shugri?
Shagrew.
Brendan.
And Jack Wright.
Sorry, Captain Flo's over there.
I'm not Captain Clue.
So you're not excited, Jack? You're not excited about having Sarah Spain?
Yeah,
on our
wow.
show, which is
Maybe no,
clearly
I have talent. Is that what we find out?
Featuring Cam Ellis.
Once I was like trying to get a happy answer out of him, and I was like, "Hey, man, like, do you take out of these situations like what is it like to know that like you're this beloved that like these videos are going viral?" And he was just like, "I don't do it for that attention." And then he just took the next question, and I was just like, "Okay, like I'm gonna melt into my seat and never come back here ever again."
And Logan Bradley.
Bears, rich history defensively. Lot of good linebackers. First round draft pick, hell of a player, a Bear that is going to go down in history. Nobody's going to forget. I am bringing back Shea McClellan.
The Bear Down Chicago podcast. Yeah, we're that Bears podcast.
All right, folks, welcome into another edition of the Bear Down Chicago podcast. For any of you that are hopping on to YouTube, because we literally just found out right this second that we are not streaming live on Twitter because Elon won't let you do it unless you pay for premium as of, I don't know, our last show. So I got some thoughts about that, but I'll keep them to myself for right now. We got an awesome episode. Regardless, I am stoked. We're going to talk to Paul Noonan. He is a Packers fan that I want to talk to, that I want to listen to. He's got great stuff. He is a really good guy. We've been going back and forth a little bit, and so I'm excited to have him on. Before I do that, though, I'm going to bring to the stage Brendan Shagrew. Now, if you want to find Brendan Shagrew on Twitter, I'm especially calling it Twitter tonight. You can hit him at Brendan Shagrew. That's Sugrue. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's at Ryan Dangle. That's Dengel. Brendan, how are you?
Hello, Ryan. Hello, everyone. It is great to be back. I just want to say very nice job on the opening video. I made it very clear to everybody that I was holding out from the podcast until we actually had an opening video. That is why I have not been on in 3 months. It is all because of the video, but Ryan finally put it together and I said, this is great. I'll be back on for this show. So thank you. It's a great job.
You are prominently featured in that introduction video. That was, man, we're busy people. And so hopefully it turned out okay. Hopefully all of you who are watching liked it. But again, our audience is a little bit more limited tonight because Elon. That's all I got to say about that. Brendan, let's thank some people before we go any bit further, if that's all right with you. All right, so you know him. We talked about him endlessly. He is our guy, Jeff Cadwalader. Now, attention Chicagoland investors and business owners. Need a commercial real estate expert? Look no further than Jeff Cadwalader at SVN Landmark Commercial Real Estate in Geneva. With generations of experience, Jeff specializes in office, retail investment, and land properties. For all of your commercial real estate needs, trust Jeff Cadwalader. Why? Because he's our guy. If you do talk to Jeff, let him know that the guys at the Bear Down Chicago podcast say hello. Visit jeffcre.com or give him a call at 630-254-4734 today. And like I said, if you talk to him, say hi from the Bear Down Chicago podcast.
What a handsome man. He could sell me some land.
I agreed, right? I would buy stuff from him.
Speaking of being handsome, make sure you get your hair nice in order. as summer continues to roll on at Sheridan's Barbershop, which is located in historic downtown Wheaton, Illinois. They've been serving the community since 1954. They have 6 barbers, and they're open 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. Sundays off for football, obviously. And they have appointments available to book online, by phone, and by phone at your convenience. So make sure you visit Sheridan'sBarbershop.com or call 630-668-0137 and book yours today. Or you can also check out their other location, Hensel's Barbershop, which is located in downtown Naperville, Illinois. They have been around since 1966. They also have 6 barbers, and they're open Tuesday through Saturday. They're accepting walk-ins and appointments, and you can book yours today at henselsbarber.com. So whether it's Sheridan's, whether it's Hensel's, they are where traditional meets modern.
Almost did it. I am muted.
You did it. You did it. I saw your mouth move.
I'm thrown off a little bit right now. I'm trying to. Do I tweet right now that we're not on Twitter?
That does suck. That really that's not fun.
No, it is not. And so, yay, we gotta buy a Twitter subscription because Elon needs more money, or rather, it's because they paid him so much money and now they got to make it back. I don't know, whatever it is. I'm going to stop complaining because I am excited to get Paul on here. Paul Noonan, the man, the myth, the legend. He is the host of the Reporting as Eligible, and he's also a contributor at Acme Packing Co. Paul, how are you, man? How's life?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Life is good. Elon does it to keep all those bots off. I haven't run into any bots on Twitter since he did that, so it's working well.
All right. So there you go.
Hey, are you being serious?
No, I'm not being serious.
the way you said that, I was like, "There's no way."
I get 15 DMs from bots a day, and I get in my comments like 2 or 3 for every 8 or so legit mentions I have. So yeah, it's terrible. It's awful. That money does nothing at all, as far as I can tell.
Awesome. Well, it's just another subscription that a small business like us are just so excited about. For all of our audio only listeners, you're hearing the same quality stuff anyway. It doesn't matter. So Paul, I just got to say this. I poached you a little bit. So our mutual friends, the Roar of the Lions guys, I was watching the podcast, you and Jack might be joining us a little bit later. You were so good. You're so thoughtful. And Paul, I'm also going to be honest with you is I've had a couple really bad experience with some Packers fans that we've invited to the podcast. Some of the things suggested to me are not anatomically correct or possible rather. And so, it just, I was really, really, really impressed with all that stuff and just very excited to talk to you. So walk us through, how did you get into the podcast, Reporting as Eligible? How did you get into writing for Acme Packing Co? Like, just how did this whole thing happen for you?
So I was raised a Packer fan, as a lot of people are raised with their teams and have been for a very, very long time. I started actually writing about baseball primarily in the early aughts when the internet and blogs first started taking off. I was a big sabermetric guy in baseball, big follower of Baseball Prospectus and Fangraphs, which eventually came around. And I actually wrote for Baseball Prospectus for a couple of years, not that long ago. But at some point, baseball got kind of conquered. And in terms of just nerd stuff, to do any kind of sabermetric contribution to baseball at this point, you basically need to be like a big finance guy or an MIT level data engineer. And I am neither of those things, don't want to be either of those things. But I actually like football better anyway. And about the same time, Football Outsiders started up. There were a couple other sites that kind of popped up along those lines. And I do enough database stuff that I was able to, work in some of my own metrics and things like that fairly early on. And I used to write on a couple of independent blogs, and the managing editor at Acme Packing Company, Evan Western, saw some of my stuff and asked if I wanted to contribute there. It's been over a decade now, I think. And so that's how I got my start there. And then when podcasting took off, I have a couple friends who are interested. I still do a baseball podcast as well. I do one on the Brewers too. And we managed to kind of luck into some good equipment before things like StreamYard were available. And we're doing the show, I think, 5 years now. I think we're on season 5. And we've had a nice steady climb in terms of listenership, and people seem to really like it. And it's both fun. It's a nice little small business to have, and I like being able to do sort of combine my sort of math, metrics, analytics stuff with a sport where there is still quite a lot to discover. The football is still pretty raw in terms of how people go about analyzing it, and there's new stuff that comes up every single year. So it's a fun thing to do.
Well, I just think one of the things that I took away from your visit to the Royal Lions was how analytically you were looking at the game. And I think that's difficult for a lot of us, because we are fans. We are fans of the team and we become so passionate about it. But just to hear you so logically going through why you thought these things were going to happen was one of the things that I really gravitated towards right away, Paul.
Yeah,
and I appreciate that about you.
Yeah, some people might call me a bad fan, and that's probably at least a little bit accurate, honestly. But like, I kind of live and die with every game, but I don't actually take a lot of sadness away from losses. Like, I'm pretty happy with wins, but not that sad on losses. And I am more concerned. Like, I get a lot wrong. Everybody gets a lot wrong, but I am like more concerned with like being truthful in how I look at the game than being the rah-rah idiot who's like, oh, my team's awesome because they're my team. Like, no, that's not how this works. Like, your team can in fact be bad. The Milwaukee Brewers, who I root for, were bad for a very long time. The Milwaukee Bucks, even more so until they lucked into Giannis Antetokounmpo. So that's how I try to look at everything. And I in writing, one thing I always try to do is actually like, maybe this will help. It probably won't. Nobody will probably see it, if any import. But I write with that kind of audience in mind. Like, hey, if I point out some of these things in the great universe that we live in, maybe somebody will notice and actually fix some of it. So that's kind of how I approach it. And yeah, I think I was pretty positive about the Bears on that podcast, if memory serves. And I am, generally speaking. So I think they have really turned into a much smarter organization over the last 2 years than they have been at any time in the rest of my life, other than the 85, other than the 80s. They were obviously fine then, but
right.
Yeah.
See, Brendan, do you see why I wanted to bring Paul on so badly? So
no, for sure. And Paul, I gotta say that I do appreciate people who they have their niche, they have their interests, especially whether it's numbers, whether it's like history or whatever, and you're true to it and you stick to it, and you're not just kind of hyping up people to hype up people and put a false sense out there. So like that, genuine reporting and writing is really appreciated. So I think that's really cool.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Let's dive in, if it's okay with you, Paul.
Let's do it.
The thing that I keep thinking about, and it is so agonizing as a Bears fan, is when Matt LaFleur was hired, I thought, why are you bringing in this guy? Tennessee's offense wasn't really that great. Like, it was a head scratcher for sure. And I think what we've come to find is that guy might be one of the best offensive minds in football consistently. And he is so exceptionally great at just finding a way to beat the Bears every single time, just finding out however good our defense is, he finds a way to attack it in a way that is really, really frustrating as a Bears fan. So I want to know two things here, Paul. I want to know what makes him so good. And the other thing is, does this guy have any great flaws? Because I want to know. So at some point, the Bears can expose that.
Yeah, he does have one. I'll get to that in a second. But I do think he may be the second best of the Shanahan crew, depending on how you want to count McVay. And he worked under both of them. He is, I think, a little more of the Shanahan school. I think they would like to go bigger, more 12 and 21 personnel than they even did last year. But they are definitely under the 49ers. Like, the 49ers, I think, go big about half the time. The Packers were like a third. They still run out of 11 most of the time. But what he excels at, that the Shanahan school does, is just building off of previous plays and concept. He's tricky. It's hard to be tricky. Like, you can study the Shanahan playbook all day, and if you run it, you'll probably be halfway decent. But it takes, I think, a special little bit of extra talent to understand how all of those plays interact, and how to understand how some of your tells on a running play that maybe didn't go anywhere in the first quarter will open up the tight end on the backside a quarter and a half later when the linebacker makes the wrong read on what was supposed to happen there. That's, I think, really where he does excel. He's also really good at using the personnel that's given to him. like I said, the 49ers like to run big. They have Kyle Juszczyk, they have George Kittle, like they have a lot of big horses to do that with. Everybody's good at blocking. The Packers have two brand new tight ends, only one of which is really a horse. Luke Musgrave is just a big wide receiver. And he still managed to use a lot of Shanahan concepts, even with kind of a smaller team at his disposal. So I think I think he is legitimately good. And not just with Jordan Love, kind of coming out of nowhere. Aaron Rodgers was terrible the year before Matt LaFleur got there. We were all ready to move on from him up here then. He's an insufferable guy, and he was starting to go downhill. And even though he didn't really like the LaFleur offense and didn't even really run it, he ran it like 75% properly. It still worked. It turned his career around. It got him another MVP award. And so I think it's a testament to LaFleur that he's kind of done this with two separate quarterbacks with vastly different personnel. And it's worked regardless of who he's had out there. The Tennessee thing threw us all for a loop too, because he was objectively not a good head coach / coordinator there. But even if you go back and look at that with a little bit of a more fine-tooth comb, I think it was Mariota who was quarterback at the time there. I could be wrong about that, but somebody like Mariota, if I'm wrong. One thing that he did, even though they were still bad, is create easier quarterback-friendly throws for Mariota, who saw his completion percentage skyrocket from like 59 to like 67 or something like that. So it still wasn't that effective because they had terrible receivers and a bad offensive line, and but you could kind of see the beginnings of the system even back then.
He also turned Ryan Tannehill's career around a little bit too, around that same time. So I go back to last year. I think it was like week 5 or 6, and Packer fans everywhere were calling Matt LaFleur to be fired, and I'm just like, are you guys stupid? Like this, we'll take him. Sure, bring him over here. He's amazing.
Yes,
even though
a brand new quarterback, give him some time.
Yeah, exactly. So the Packers obviously made a ton of big moves this offseason. Let's talk about the additions first. The two big ones, most definitely, are Xavier McKinney in the defensive backfield, and then Josh Jacobs replacing Aaron Jones at running back. There's also a couple other minor moves. I mean, signing Andre Dillard for depth and bringing in a new kicker. But in your opinion, which is the biggest signing and why?
So it's definitely McKinney, without any question at all. And the one thing the Packers have been good at over the last couple of years, at least, is understanding their weaknesses and making moves to address them. Safety has been a disaster for them I'm not going to say all the way back to Woodson and Collins, because they've had a couple of decent ones in between then, but it's been, Adrian Amos was good, but since he's been gone, they've been terrible. And even when he was there, his safety mate was usually terrible. So it was costing them games, frankly. They had poor defense out of the back. All of the corners were forced to play extra conservative because they didn't trust the safeties behind them. Their run defense, which is a whole thing, was largely contributed to by their safeties not being able to tackle. And so they did what they always do when they have a weakness, which is they addressed it every way possible by selecting many, many different options to potentially fill it. So Xavier McKinney is the big one, because Xavier McKinney's good. We know he's good already. He has been already a very good player in the NFL for many years. So he should at least anchor the back for them. I hear him called a post safety more than anything. I feel like we invent new safety terms every year. But he should allow the defense in front of him to do a lot more of what they would like to under their new defensive coordinator. That's going to be a lot more aggressive play. But they also spent 2.5. We'll go with 2.5 draft picks on safeties as well. I think at least one of those guys is going to end up as a slot corner. That was Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, and Kitana Ladapo, I think, if I'm getting that right. And so they had basically zero options coming into this year at safety. Their safeties last year, Darnell Savage and Jonathan Owens. You guys will learn about him soon. They hugely upgraded there. And I went from the rookies, who knows, they might be bad, but at least McKinney plus 3 options is probably going to be a colossal upgrade at that point. Jacobs, I think they did need to address that position. But running backs you can get in a lot of different ways. So it's a big signing. It's a good bounce back candidate signing. Josh Jacobs 2 years ago was outstanding, and he had a down season last year. But I mean, he was a Raider. Raiders last year all had down seasons. And so if you're trying to fill the gap left by Aaron Jones, it's difficult to do. On a per carry basis, Jones is one of the best in the league. Jacobs probably won't be that good, but he'll probably be on the field a lot more. And even if he's like 85% of Aaron Jones and on the field like 1.5 times as much, that is more than enough to make up for that. So those were two big holes. They did a nice job plugging them. McKinney's the big one, though. He will actually allow them to maybe have a good defense for the first time. Again, when the Bears, one thing you can say about the Bears, frequent good defenses. The Packers, like once every couple decades. So it's been a while.
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, McKinney, I was so mad when the Packers signed him. That was just a fantastic move. But I do want to talk about like the Jacobs-Jones dynamic a little bit, because I think a lot of people were perplexed when they allowed Jones to leave and they just signed Jacobs to a lot of money. They probably, I think I agree with you saying that Jones was banged up. He wasn't going to be on the field as much, and I know you're a numbers guy, but I think they're going to lose a lot of leadership without Aaron Jones. I think he was that heart and soul of especially that offense. And now you got a new guy coming in with Josh Jacobs. I do wonder how that's going to be, especially with a very young team. Do you agree with that? Or are you just thinking they're like a dime a dozen with backs?
So normally I am definitely of the school of it's relatively easy to replace running backs. But one thing I forgot to come back to that I'm going to come back to now is one of Matt LaFleur's big weaknesses. And that is the Packers do tend to be a little overcommitted to the run. They do that just like the 49ers do. I think they're the top 2 run percentage teams in the league. But the 49ers have Christian McCaffrey. They generate a lot of positive plays. And Aaron Jones last year was one of, I think, 4 running backs to have a positive EPA per play. I think every single other running back in the league didn't. This really came to the front for the Packers on second down. If you look at any metric, advanced or otherwise, it was their worst down, and it's because they tended to throw out these sort of just waste play runs, no matter what the down and distance was. 2nd and 10, a lot of runs. 3rd and short, a lot of runs that did not work very well. And Aaron Jones kind of kept him afloat. I think would have been kind of a disaster on second down if in his 50% of the carries he got on second down, he wasn't killing it. His backup last year was A.J. Dillon. He is one of the worst running backs in football. He is good in pass protection, and he looks like he should be excellent at football. He's an absolute tank, but he doesn't run like it. He actually does not get a lot of push. He runs a little too upright. He doesn't have good balance, and he has terrible vision. He almost always picks the wrong hole. So Jones allowed them to succeed on a lot of plays where Dillon plus average running back would have been just a complete disaster. They do need Jacobs to bring something to the table to stop that from happening. The reason I'm kind of optimistic about it is, well, first of all, they drafted Marshawn Lloyd out of USC as well. And so Dillon's carries, I think, will be severely limited. And that's kind of why I think this will work. Like the combination of Dillon plus Jones, I think, is kind of equal to Jacobs most of the time. But you are right. Aaron Jones was well loved. He has, if you look at any given Packer meme over the last couple of years, probably features Aaron Jones, like wearing cheese hats, wearing big necklaces, waving to a cowboy as he runs into the end zone before they threw flags on you for that. And everybody did like the guy. But he's 29 and he's undersized and he misses time all the time. And they're not going to pay anybody, especially at that position, of that size profile to stick around. The writing was just on the wall there. The Packers are very, very rigorous in not paying for guys they think are going to taper off, even if they have a year left in him. And I don't think Jones is done. He was phenomenal last year when he played. I think he'll be good for the Vikings until he runs out of gas. But I think they'll be okay. I think this is Love's team now. And in terms of leadership on offense, they're all under 26. Aaron Jones is 29. It's not that big of a difference, but he's an old veteran and everybody else on the team is a kid. So their chemistry seems to be fine. And I think they have their leader and it won't be a big deal.
You mentioned Marshawn Lloyd. You have 11 total draft picks. It's quite a haul. How do you feel about the Packers draft this past draft?
I think it's a little bit of an underrated draft. They got hit a little bit in the media because they focused on traditionally non-valuable positions, that being safety and off-ball linebacker. But those are positions that kill the Packers with some frequency. Their linebackers, just like their safeties, have been terrible for quite a long time. The last time they had an off-ball linebacker with a top 10 PFF grade for the season was Desmond Bishop in 2010 when they won the Super Bowl. It's been a long time. So they had AJ Hawk for a long time. He's terrible. Their current main inside linebacker is Quay Walker. I don't think he's very football smart. He makes a lot of dumb errors. He also makes a lot of bad reads. Uber athletic guy, just doesn't seem to be able to put it together on the field. And so they needed to fix that. They get gashed. Nobody gets gashed on the ground like the Packers do. They have the Colin Kaepernick game. They have Russell Wilson, games where they got killed twice doing that. Who got him? Did Jalen Hurts get him? I don't know. Like every running quarterback rushes for like 200 yards against them. They get gashed on the ground by big running backs. It's a big problem, and it's been one for a while. So I think they at least addressed that with Edger and Cooper. They shouldn't be terrible anymore. The Tyrone Hopper pick was a little bit of an overpick, but they basically went into the draft needing to fix safety and off-ball linebacker. I think they did that. I think it'll at least be okay. And with their first round pick, they still went high value. They took Jordan Morgan, who is probably a guard, but maybe a tackle. So, offensive line is always a place where you want to have as many guys as possible. And so I think in all, a pretty good draft for what they needed.
I hate having this conversation. Statistically, it doesn't make any sense to go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to potentially Jordan Love. I got to know, Paul, is he as good as what we saw down the stretch? Is he simply a byproduct of Matt LaFleur's offense? I mean, it's not fair. I know you understand this deep down, and I know you are more of an analytics guy than just a fan, but it's it's just not fair, man. You guys can't.
It's bullshit, Paul. It's bullshit.
It kind of is. I agree with that. I do think he probably is good. I think there's a 10% chance that all of us Packer fans are making a very common mistake, which is that if a unit, the defense, receiver, whatever, quarterback finishes strong, that it's going to carry over to the next season, because that is what happened. Jordan Love was not that good in the first half of the season. Really, it's like a 50-50 split. Turned it on halfway through and was basically the second best quarterback by advanced metrics, and let's say one of the 5 best. Nobody's better than Mahomes, and nobody outperformed Purdy, but he was right there with both of them in terms of whatever you want to use, PFF grades or production or whatever. The reason I think it's likely to stick is the team is so young. As we all heard in the playoffs, they were the youngest team ever to win a playoff game, at least on offense. Their entire receiving core was drafted in the last 2 seasons, and tight ends, all of them, every single one. And so it's not surprising they struggled early, because it was Jordan Love's first year, and it was all of the receivers' first or second years. The only guys who were in their second year were Christian Watson, who missed most of the season, and Romeo Doubs. And I like Romeo Doubs, but I think he's the 4th best receiver on the team. So I think it's going to stick for that reason. Now, the other reason I think it'll stick is Matt LaFleur is a factor. He calls a good game, and Jordan Love seems to be really adept at executing it. He is much, much better at it than Rodgers is in a lot of ways. Rodgers did not like to target the middle of the field. He thought that it led to more interceptions than normal. Jordan Love is great at targeting the middle of the field. It's his favorite throw. It's the only thing he was good at Utah State. He was kind of bad at everything else there. He is one of the best throwers of the ball just in front, from 1 yard to 10 yards, which is where the Packers run a lot of their offense. And what really happened in the second half of the year is, in the first half, I would say, executed the offense pretty well, but failed when the play broke down. That's kind of why they struggled early on. He also wasn't so good at the RPO game early on. It took him a little getting used to make his reads properly. The second half, he really turned into a playmaker when the play broke down. I think he started keeping his eyes downfield a little bit more and started looking to run to throw rather than run to just pick up a few yards. And that he has a great arm, and that arm really started to play in those scenarios. And his receivers started to figure out, oh, he can throw all the way down the field. Play breaks down, we take off, and he'll find us. So I do think that's going to stick. And even if it is mostly LaFleur, it kind of doesn't matter because he'll be with him for the foreseeable future. There's not really a good way to separate out quarterbacks from their excellent offensive coordinators, and he's going to have it. So it's kind of a moot point until he, leaves the team. I think they have a good one. I don't think he's going to come back to earth. I think he'll be solidly a top 10, and I think he has top 5 upside with what we saw at the end of the year.
That hurts my heart.
That
now,
sucks.
Yeah, in defense of the Packers, since 1991, when they acquired Brett Favre via trade, the Packers have actually drafted the most quarterbacks of any team in football, tied with the New England Patriots, who are the other team that has done that. And, one of the ways that you get good quarterbacks is to take a lot of quarterbacks. The Bears are, I think, very much in the middle of that list. And, if you don't give yourself as many outs, then you're not going to hit on them as much. So a lot of those Packers guys worked out okay. It was like Hasselbeck and Mark Brunell and Aaron Brooks. And they brought in Kurt Warner for a cup of coffee. So that's how they get those guys.
Brian Brom. No, not really.
Well, Brian Brom, you joke about Brian Brom. Sorry to cut you off, but they drafted Aaron Rodgers in 2005. And the first year he started was 2008. They clearly didn't trust him that much because they drafted both Brian Brom and Matt Flynn in that draft and had an open competition going into camp that Rodgers won. So, like, even with Rodgers, they didn't trust that they had something until they did.
Oh, I know. It's very smart decision making. I've definitely said it, especially being the Bears, for the quarterback ineptitude that this team has had. Always take shots for quarterbacks. I mean, going back in 2016, they had 3 fourth-round picks, and they just said, no, we don't want Dak Prescott. We'll take DeAndre Hall out of UNI because, they need a new safety. So I definitely agree with that. I was just going to say my biggest hope is that Jordan Love turns into a Jared Goff type with Sean McVay, where he starts to kind of go down a little bit, or he's Nick Foles from 2013, who went on the biggest heater of all time and then fell off and then doesn't come back to win the Super Bowl for the team that drafted him. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. I do have a legit Jordan Love question before we get off to another subject. So obviously he's kind of doing the hold-in situation. He's most likely going to be the highest paid quarterback, highest paid player of all time at this point. Are you nervous at all about that? Because I think as an objective, if I'm trying to be objective here, I understand the season that Jordan Love had, but I do say that while it was only like half a season, maybe 2/3, and you're committing a lot of money to a guy like that who you believe will take that next step. Do you have any trepidation at that whatsoever?
Not really. And the only reason is if the worst case scenario happens and he does turn into a pumpkin, he turns into Carson Wentz or Nick Foles, and he is bad, it'll probably take them something like 3 years to get to that realization. Like he's coming off a very good season. He'll get at least one. Like the upcoming season is, I think, a gimme. No matter what he does, they'll trust him for one more. And even if they give him huge money, and they will, you're right, he's going to be the highest paid player. By the time they realize he's bad, that contract is still going to be, it's not going to be up, but it's going to be in the vicinity where you can start picking guys again and preparing for the future. And it shouldn't cripple them. Like, and that's a worst case scenario. Most of the time, the worst case scenario doesn't happen. Maybe he ends up being average, and that's terrible. It's not good to overpay average quarterbacks. We've seen a lot of teams, screw themselves by doing that. But that's one where you can at least play competent football for a few years and then decide to move on after a while. Honestly, even if they pay him a lot now, we've seen enough that their risk is pretty low. And it's not like they could fix it right away. Like, if they don't pay Jordan Love, what's the alternative? Next year's quarterback class is terrible. They weren't going to be drafting high enough this class to get anybody good. It's not like there's a better option out there, especially given the information we have. So I think it's fine. And hey, the guy deserves to get paid. He actually did them a solid. They came to a nice agreement to avoid a franchise tag situation and still get Jordan paid, and everybody played nice with each other. So I'm totally fine with it.
It's a very good point. Very rational thinking. I'll go off from quarterback and go to kicker because Packers had a kicking problem last year, and it actually cost you guys a chance to go to the conference championship game. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in whether it's Anders Carlson, whether it's Greg Joseph? I believe they drafted a kicker as well. Name's escaping me. How confident are you that it's going to be fixed this year?
Not very. Kickers are hard to diagnose, so they can have random bad seasons. But there's a lot I don't like about Anders Carlson. For one thing, while he sometimes shows off a big leg, which is why he got picked, it's not as good as his brother. Like Daniel's leg is much better. And he suffered an injury that robbed him of some distance in college. And more than anything, like he seemed to actually kind of choke. Kickers need to be nails out there mentally, and he doesn't really seem to do that. He missed a lot of easy kicks, a lot of 40 and in kicks. He was actually, I don't know, stats might make me a liar on this one, but I think he might have been better from distance than he was from short. And I think that's because he gets out there with a pretty big leg and just whips the heck out of it. And he's calm and, just trying to get it the distance, and it works. When he's got to aim, it doesn't work. He's also like a nepotism hire. Like he was, our special teams coordinator is Rich Bisaccia. He coached Daniel Carlson. I think they picked him because of that. And it's just not a good process to do that kind of thing. So I'm not a big fan of Greg Joseph either, but I think I would feel actually slightly more comfortable with him in that role, especially now the kickoff leg doesn't matter at all anymore. Like it was one thing when, if having a guy that could put it through the end zone was valuable. That is no longer the case. I'd rather have a guy that is super accurate and maybe doesn't have quite as much leg.
What's it going to take, Paul, for the Packers to get over the hump, get past the NFC Championship, to get past the San Francisco 49ers and make it to the Super Bowl?
They actually usually play the 49ers pretty well. They just need a defense that's not run by a complete moron. That's, I think, more than anything, what they're looking for. They replaced Joe Barry was their defensive coordinator. And if you don't know who Joe Barry is, speaking of nepotism, he is Rod Marinelli's son-in-law. Rod first hired him as his defensive coordinator for the 0-16 Detroit Lions, which started Joe Barry's career. He has failed everywhere he has gone. He has never coordinated a defense as the defensive coordinator that is ranked higher than 20th in DVOA, and he's had a lot of shots at it. That's an incredible statistic because defense is actually really volatile, and even bad defensive coordinators usually luck into a top half season every once in a while. He never has because he's atrocious. So the Packers defense is hardly perfect, but it's much more talented than the performance that it's put on the field the last 3 years. And so that's what they need to get over the hump. I don't have a lot of concerns about the offense. If Love is average, I think their offense will still be really good. But that defense was atrocious and maybe still will be. But at least they changed the main problem and addressed a lot of the weaknesses at positions there too. It's all about defense for them. That's where they need to actually get right.
So give us a prediction then. Where do you see the Packers kind of finishing this upcoming season?
I think they will be, so I think they'll be quite good. I think the main problem they're going to have is the division's quite a bit better than it was last year. And the schedule, generally speaking, predicting schedules in July is dumb, but it looks like it's going to be harder than it was last year. So I think they'll finish like 10-7-ish, and I do think they'll make the playoffs. I do think the defense will improve. I'm pretty bullish on that. You can't fall off the floor. So I think Jeff Hafley will be quite a bit better than Joe Barry. I don't see how he could be worse. And I think that they're good enough and they'll take a step forward on offense, enough to hang right there with the Lions. And I do think that the Bears will be right there with them too. I kind of just think the Vikings are the only real dregs of the division. So, but I think they'll be a good team, but it's going to be hard to get like a 12-win season with this schedule and with the competition that they're going to have to face in the division.
So speaking of the Bears, we haven't talked about the Bears enough. It's the Bears podcast. Too much Packers talk for my liking.
Sorry.
Are you excited to watch Hard Knocks with them? It's been a big buzz down here in Chicagoland, and it's coming up in a couple weeks.
I'm interested to check it out. I'm not a super big Hard Knocks guy. I will watch it just so I can talk to other people about it. But I also just wonder how much it lies to you about what's going on, and can bias you a little bit because there's storylines in Hard Knocks. There's the undrafted guys who they try to get you to root for. They try to get the one tearjerker moment where he doesn't make the team, and they obviously love tabloid moments. But yeah, I am looking forward to it. I actually really like Bears insider stuff. It's not as fun now that they're good, but like Adam Johns at the Athletic used to. He has had good access for a while, and he was the king of, I think, getting the Bears to really talk in depth about their process under the last regime, in a way where they were really proud of it. But he was.
Oh, I think Paul. I think he cut out.
Paul, you still with us? I can see you, but I just can't hear you.
He started complimenting the Bears, and somebody
yeah, right. Packerland is not going to let it happen.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Can you hear me?
Now we got you. We got you back. Yeah, you're saying nice things about the Bears, and then it just cut out.
All right.
It's
so
strange.
I was going to say, in the old regime, like Adam Johns did this big thing when they drafted David Montgomery, and about the process behind it. And David Montgomery, nothing wrong with David Montgomery as a player, fine running back. But in that draft, I believe the Bears had 4 total picks. I think only 2 of them were in the top 4 or something along those lines. And they traded up to get him. And the Bears were not juggernauts at the time. They had a lot of needs that they needed to address depth. They needed to address offensive line. And the whole story is like the Bears front office like cheering on their scouting of him, like doing the hand raise, like the Lions did with Jahmyr Gibbs last year when they drafted him. And it's a great, like, straightforward indictment piece on them. So I do think they can be fun there, but honestly, good organizations are boring. And I kind of think that they've reached the point where they may not be as exciting as one would hope. Like, it's fun to have Caleb Williams. There's a lot of excitement in the building, I'm sure, but there's probably not as much drama as there has been in the past.
So I think I know how this is going to go, Paul, but I'm going to ask you regardless. How do you break down the NFC North? You don't need to give me wins and loss numbers, just who's 1, who's 2, 3, and 4.
So I do think the Lions are still the team to beat. They are not juggernauts. They'll always have a little bit of a vulnerability because their quarterback, I feel like, is at like Kirk Cousins kind of level, not top of the heap level. But they're very good, obviously. They have good skill position players. Their offensive line is phenomenal. Their offensive coordinator is phenomenal. And their defense is, I think, still a work in progress. But they kind of did what the Packers do. They attacked their cornerback weakness every which way that they could. They drafted 2 in the first 2 rounds. They signed, Carlton Davis in the offseason, I think. So they've done a nice job at firming up their weaknesses. And they're definitely the team to beat. They're well run. They're very talented. I do think the Packers will finish second, and I think they'll be, all these teams will be reasonably close. Still, I think too many question marks for me to put them ahead of the Lions in terms of the defense. We in Packerland sort of hypothesize that the defense is pretty talented and would be much better with decent coordination, but that is just a theory. Like, it's also possible Rashawn Gary just doesn't finish off his sacks because he just has a problem doing that. And it's possible Jair Alexander just can't stay on the field for more than half a season. And it's possible that Preston Smith is now an old man who can't play edge anymore. So there's too many questions for me on defense to anoint them as like the clear favorite in the division. They're definitely not. But with the Bears, I think people are underrating them a little bit because of just skepticism of rookie quarterbacks generally. But progress in the NFL isn't linear like ever. You're going from, I'm going to talk bad about Justin Fields, who he seems like a good guy. And, there's a couple tools you can work with there, but he was a bad quarterback last year. He was a bottom, 4 quarterback. And I like Caleb Williams a lot. And when you have a 1-1 guy who it actually turns into something, those guys are often good pretty quickly. When they're not, it's like when Peyton Manning was bad in his first season, it was because the Colts had literally no other talent on the team. Same with Troy Aikman on the Cowboys. That is not the case here. You have one of the best receiving cores in football for him to throw to. So I think there's a very good chance that you have a colossal upgrade in quarterback immediately. And given how the defense came along last year, I think that they'll be a force pretty much right away. So I think the Bears will be right with them there at 9-8, 10-7 as well. The Vikings are going to be the worst. They have quarterback problems. I saw a few of the sites tweeting about a cool Sam Darnold throw today, and you don't have to do that. Like you can you can just be like, nice steady hand until we get this all figured out. They're obviously fine. Justin Jefferson's awesome. You all know who the Vikings have on their team, but until JJ McCarthy either turns into something or they have a different quarterback, there's a ceiling on what the Vikings can do. So not worried about them. They're going to finish last.
I wish you could have heard our token Vikings fans, who usually are pretty measured in their approach, just sing the praises of the Vikings to say that we should all be really, really worried about the Vikings, maybe even trying to take atop the NFC North. And
so I like JJ more than I think a lot of people do. He actually hit a lot of my metrics in college. The knock on him is really small sample size because Jim Harbaugh doesn't like to throw the ball that much. That wasn't JJ McCarthy's fault. That's just what Jim does. But JJ is 21. He's the youngest quarterback in this draft. Like he should probably get the Drake May, Jordan Love treatment and get a year off to work on some mechanical flaws that he definitely has. He doesn't throw a good outside deep ball. He doesn't throw with the best timing all the time. I think he can be good, but don't start that guy right away. Like take a tank season here. That's what they should do.
Well, and that's what they were saying too. And I completely agree with that. But then they were hyping up Sam Darnold as we're going to be in really good shape with Sam Darnold after they were like, yeah, we don't need Kirk Cousins. I'm like, what are you doing?
Look, the Vikings, I think, have a good offensive plan, good offensive coaches, but you're not going to get more out of a guy than Shanahan got. And so you're not going to get a better Sam Darnold than the 49ers got. He's just a guy. Like Sam Darnold's bad. There's no reason to be cocky about that.
Folks, Paul Noonan, so he's the host of the Reporting as Eligible podcast, and as well as a contributor to the Acme Packing Co. Paul, I just want to say thank you so much for spending your Wednesday night with us in July. But football's it's a lot closer than we think. I mean, the Hall of Fame game is next week. Like that messes my mind.
We got training camp. We got the Hall of Fame game coming up. My kids go back to school in like 2 weeks. Like it's almost here.
Absolutely. Well, so Paul, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us on the Bear Down Chicago podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me, guys.
Thanks,
Take care, Paul. I told you, good guy, knows his stuff, very measured. We've had conversations with Packers fans. Some were good, some were thank you so much for being on the show. And then as soon as we finish it, I'm like, I don't ever want to talk to that person again. I would love to have Paul back. I think he's great at what he does. I love his measured approach. It's good stuff, man.
Very analytical. Definitely knows his stuff. I do appreciate the measured approach. Just a fantastic guy. And I liked what he said also about just the old regime, just being able to see through the BS. And it just took me back to the 2019 season when we all thought David Montgomery was the missing piece to that team when they didn't do jack for the kicking situation. And they tried to like hype it up saying this is our only problem was Jordan Howard and the kicker and nothing else mattered. And we all bought it. It was so bad. So now that it's over, now that it's in the past, I definitely appreciate it. But it's just funny to hear him give that.
You remember the hype video that came out like a couple days before the first game against the Packers, and it had the air raid siren going, and I was just like, oh man, it's on. Everything changes. And no, we don't. We still don't beat the Packers. You know what? I wish I had Paul's approach. I mean this sincerely because I wish I wasn't emotional every time I watched the Packers kick the Bears' ass, right? Because it's just not fun. It's just not something that's super enjoyable. And I wish I wasn't a fan sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So since I started writing every single year, I still keep my fandom, but I can feel it getting a little bit more. I'm thinking more logically and I'm thinking more measured, and I'm just kind of like seeing things in a different light. I know there are there's those accounts that hype up every single thing that every single player does, and we appreciate them. It's fun to be a fan, but I would say writing has definitely hardened me when it comes to being a fan. And I'm trying to be a little bit more analytical and measured and not get too high or too low because
Sure.
it is a long season. And I remember I wore a bag on my head last year after week 1 when things got really, really bad. And I remember something Shell's saying. He's like, the Bears are going to be the worst team in the NFL this year. Book it, mark it. And at the time, I'm like, look, that's a little bit too extreme. I know me wearing a bag over my head saying this is one thing, but it's a long season. We have a long way to go.
Sure.
And sure enough, at the end of January, it was better. But, sometimes it is a little bit easier in my situation, just writing so much to take emotion out of it. But that's also the best part of being a fan is just living the highest of highs and just having to deal with the lowest of lows. But it makes the highest of highs better.
I think it's interesting that you say that because as we've done the podcast, you're right. You watch a terrible game and you're like, no, I have to like come up with a reason and logic behind why this game went the way that it did. And so to what you're saying, I totally agree, Brendan. I am far less emotional about the game. You could ask my wife; she'll agree to the same thing, except 2 times a year. I can't drop that one, and I don't know why. I get angry and frustrated in ways that I just don't. Man, you lose to the Vikings, they lose to the Lions. I'm like, all right, cool. You know what? Part of like the logical part of me says I like this rise that the Lions are on because I feel for them because they've been so terrible they've been one of the worst franchises in NFL history, right? Forever. And now like they're getting close to the Super Bowl. Like I can look at that and go, okay, that's cool. Logically, yeah, sure. But they're in our division. I'm supposed to hate them. I don't hate them. But when I watch the Green Bay Packers games, for some reason, that analytical part of me that is largely taken over out the window completely.
I get it. And I do get it. I still won't pick them to beat them until it happens. I am Bart Simpson at the chalkboard. I am not picking the Packers. I'm not picking the Bears to beat the Packers until it actually happens. I will go down with that ship, unfortunately.
LaFleur, like he has the organization's number. It doesn't matter who's the head coach at the time. He knows what he's doing. He's inside their head. Offensively, I mean, like thinking about how good the Bears defense played now without Jalen Johnson being a huge part of that. But that last game against the Packers, right? He just knew where to attack them, how to attack them. And it was so unbelievably frustrating.
Dude, they had like 450 yards of offense and it was still a 1-score game. Like I'm looking at the box score. It's like 17-9. And then you see the like just difference, contrast, whatever, in yards of offense. It's insane. The only reason the Bears were in that game was because they couldn't manage their timeouts. But last thing I'll say about that, and this is going to make Bears fans angry. I knew this stat, but it's when you hear it a certain way, it stings a lot more. I was listening to Carmen and Yurko the other day, and the Bears in the last 28 games against the Packers are 3-25. 3-25. What the hell, man?
I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad.
That bad? That's worse than the White Sox.
And that's saying a lot. Whoa, boy, that's saying a lot. Thinking that the Bears had the all-time lead, and it just has been wiped away, and the Packers now own that. And all right, Brendan, I'm serious. I'm going to go down a deep dark depression, and it's not even August yet, right? It's not even the Hall of Fame game. I know you weren't with Jack and I when we talked with the guys in the Vikings and the Lions, but I'm kind of curious, like, where do you kind of stand in this? It's too early to pick. And I agree with what Paul said, scheduling wise, like you don't know which teams are going to be good this season and which ones are going to be bad this season yet. And so where do you kind of see this NFC North kind of playing out? Do you agree with the Vikings fans that we got to watch and see what happens? Or do you agree with what Paul is saying that it's Lions, Packers, Bears? Where are you at on that, Brendan?
I agree more with what Paul's saying. And I do like Kevin O'Connell as a head coach. I think he's done a really good job, especially being put in some interesting situations, especially last year with Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins. But look, I mean, I think I was talking to Brian Perez, who runs Bears Talk, and he's like, boy, I hope the Vikings sign Baker Mayfield for a lot of money. And then they're just kind of in that middle ground. I'm like, no, give them somebody like Sam Darnold and let them kind of figure out what they need to do with a rookie quarterback, because that's going to be a much worse situation. And lo and behold, that actually happened. The Vikings are in that Bears territory from 2021 and 2017 with signing a veteran who hasn't had that much success. I mean, I guess you could say Andy Dalton did have success, but he was definitely on the downturn of his career.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that at some point a rookie quarterback can come in. And now you're having conversations. How many first team reps should they get? Who's going to be running the offense this day versus this day? Who's going to be the backup? Is it going to be Mullins? Is it going to be McCarthy? And I think that kind of, if you don't really know that, unless you're doing the Packers situation where we have a tried and true veteran, a great player like Aaron Rodgers, and we're going to stash this rookie for a couple years and just let him learn, not even touch him, you're in a weird situation. And like we know, a lot of times it can go bad. Their supporting cast is really good. I do have questions about Jordan Addison now that he has been arrested in 2 years in a row. Wonder if he's going to face some discipline there. TJ Hawkinson still coming back from his ACL. There's somebody who may not be, I don't know when he's going to be ready to go. Pretty sure he's on PUP list right now. Their defense, tragically has undergone some, serious issues with the tragic passing of Kyrie Jackson.
Right.
Mekhi Blackman just tore his ACL today. So they're down now in their secondary. There's a lot of question marks there. And I like I said, I like Kevin O'Connell. I just don't know if he's going to be able to pull this team out and make them, definitely not for the division lead. I mean, maybe they'll hover around 500 best case scenario. Yeah. But I just don't see this being a good year for them. I am scared of the Packers still. I am scared of the Lions. I do wonder, though, if the Lions did enough, especially on offense, because they do have the pieces in place with Amon-Ra St. Brown. They locked him up. Penei Sewell, Jared Goff, all of those guys. There's questions at wide receiver, too, if Jameson Williams can take that next step. I have questions about that. The running backs are great. But then they didn't really add anything else this offseason. It was all about keeping the talent that they have. And it got them to the NFC Championship game. But should they have done more? I'm not sure. I just think that's a question that needs to be asked. Defensively, pretty pissed they got Terrion Arnold. That was a great pick. And I knew it was going to potentially be either the Lions or the Packers. So he had to go to one of them. And then, is Dan Campbell... He's obviously at this point a good coach, but is he going to make some of those in-game mistakes and kind of stay too far true to himself to then be his own enemy, maybe go get too aggressive and then take the take the game away and make things kind of, turn upside down. I don't know. Maybe he needs a little bit more help there. The Lions are just going all in the next couple of years, and they have to pray that Jared Goff can still be that guy and keep ascending as a player. I just don't know if he can be that. And then the Packers, they do scare me because of that young core. They've been able to do it without like a number one wide receiver too, because Jaden Reed, Christian Watson was hurt. I know we talked a little bit about Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks. All of those guys had big games and nobody really stood out as a true number one option. So that's kind of scary because somebody could ascend from that group. But I have questions on if Jordan Love can take over that offensive identity, because Aaron Jones was the heart and soul of that team. I don't think anybody should question that. And then their defense, maybe it is addition by subtraction, just getting rid of Joe Barry is going to help a lot of things, as well as them shoring up the back end of their defense. So all of that is to say that I have the Lions first right now. I have the Packers second right now. And I have the Bears right behind them at that 9-8, 10-7 range. And I think all three of those teams are going to vie for the playoffs until the very last week. And all three may make it. I know USA Today just predicted that. So the whole playing the division at the end of the year is going to be a wild situation that is going to be very stressful, but at the same time, I'm looking forward to.
The thing I keep asking myself is Caleb Williams. I mean, the same question that everybody is asking, rookie quarterback, but even more so is Shane Waldron. You know, I know I don't want to be a wet blanket, but I still don't love the hire, and more Seattle Seahawks fans coming through and just absolute utter relief that he's gone. You know, doesn't run the ball well, but might be passing a little bit better. But obviously with the weapons that he's got, you know, is he on the same level as a Ben Johnson or a Matt LaFleur? Can he get there? And a KOC, you know, for that matter too. Like there's so many question marks about this team where I feel like the ceiling is ridiculously high, but I think that floor is a little bit lower than Bears fans want to admit. And that's what has me scared, because I'm with you in terms of the order, though, you know, I still think back to, you know, is Eberflus the guy? I think he's a really good defensive coordinator, but I still don't know if he is, if he's the head coach. There are so many questions that I'm still asking myself, Brendan, that I just don't have the answer to.
The Eberflus one is definitely the biggest one. And I know our resident Captain Flus is not here, but we can say that he's improved in some areas, but it's still a big question mark. And we just, all of us are in agreement that we cannot be in a situation at the end of the season where the Bears have to fire Matt Eberflus because things went so wrong, and now you are resetting the rookie quarterback clock again. That's the one thing you cannot do.
Yeah.
And I will give Eberflus a lot of credit so far, and somebody actually brought it up in a press conference recently. He's a lot more confident. I think he is projecting the messages a lot better to the media. I think that also means he's doing it more to the team too. Because we've heard some of those awkward, like, locker room speeches. I heard one of them this offseason, and I'm like, this guy's kind of got me fired up. That wouldn't have happened last year. I'm dead serious. So he spent time working on himself to make sure he's a better communicator. And part of that does go into coaching. I think he is relatively good as just kind of an X's and O's guy on defense, but you have to be a good just overall manager of the team and the players you have. And I think he's shown improvement there. But that is to say that there are question marks. He has to prove it on the field. He cannot start 0-4, 1-5 again like they did last year because of the gauntlet waiting for them at the end of the season. Now, in terms of Shane Waldron, I mean, I know we talked about this, but what team doesn't hate their OC at some point? We just talked about Packers fans wanting to launch Matt LaFleur to Sheboygan. Like, that was real. And then things turned around like, oh, okay, so he's actually not bad.
Yeah.
Shane Waldron did really, really well with Geno Smith. Geno Smith came out of nowhere. Do you remember the two teams?
Yeah.
It might have even been three before he was between the Jets. He was on the Giants. Do you know the O's?
No, I don't, man. And because why would you pay any attention to it? Because
exactly. Why would you pay any attention to Geno Smith until 2022? Exactly. And that's what Shane Waldron did. The other fact is, if you have a good quarterback, if you have a guy that can just figure out the system, learn it, process it, and then get on the field and actually do the work, it makes the offensive coordinator's job a lot easier. And I think Bears fans as a whole, not that nobody's a Luke Getsy apologist, but being removed a little bit from Justin Fields, I think we all can take the Bears glasses off and say, okay, well, Fields really didn't do Getsy a lot of favors either. Not that Getsy did Fields. The whole thing was a mess.
It is really interesting to hear just a few reports. I'm not diving deep into it because he's no longer playing with the Chicago Bears, but hearing just quick snippets of beat reporters for the Pittsburgh Steelers say this kid's having a really hard time reading defenses. Did we break him, or was it simply you drafted a kid who can't read NFL defenses? And it's seemingly, I think that's more of what it is. But I don't care. I want to move past it. Caleb is our quarterback. Let's get to that.
And that's all I'm saying. Like, so far, the reports out of training camp, Caleb is processing things super fast. There were issues, maybe not issues, but things that needed to be worked on with cadence, with spitting out the plays at the offensive line, making sure everybody's in the right position. that's been figured out according to players themselves. So that shows you that, hey, this guy is learning. He's able to process the system and work with Waldron to make sure the plays get out and everybody's where they need to be. That's huge, especially at this point, because as most people should know, you don't have to do that in college. The coach just holds up a number or a board, and that's the play. It's a huge learning curve, and Caleb so far, from all reports, is passing the test with flying colors.
Brendan, I do want to get to anything that we missed in just a second, and I know the answer to this question, but I'm still going to ask it. Are you really excited about Hard Knocks?
Yeah. I'm so excited. I've always liked Hard Knocks.
Same.
And I'm really invested in what the Giants series is.
So good.
Right?
Yes.
It's I cannot believe they signed up for that. That was the dumbest thing they should for fans and the viewers. It's great, but I cannot believe the Giants actually signed up for it. To hear all of just the conversations and
the Saquon stuff,
the draft stuff with he's asking his kids, who should we draft? Did you watch last night's episode yet?
No, I haven't, but it's okay. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. Okay. So with that being said, yes, I think we're both super stoked about it. Now, Brendan, anything that we missed, anything that's being reported? I mean, you've been putting out a lot of stuff. I saw your 3 guys that have really stood out at camp so far. Another phenomenally written article at Bears Wire. For all of you that are watching right now, if you're not following Brendan's stuff on Bears Wire, you need to stop what you're doing. He is the assistant editor. He's so damn good at what he does. Brendan, anything that we're missing that we need to be watching, that we need to be paying attention to?
Well, right now, I think the biggest thing is no injuries. I'm trying to think of the different things that are happening. Yeah, so far things have been pretty quiet on the injury front. Guys are a little bit limited, maybe nursing some very minor things, but nothing catastrophic. Some of the guys that have stood out, Tyler Scott's had a few big plays. He's been the forgotten guy in that receiving room.
He's fast.
He's fast. He's so fast. He makes fast people look not fast. Do you know that quote?
Yes, I can't think of the movie, but I've heard that quote before. It's
okay. Longest Yard, but
okay.
Yeah. So no, Tyler Scott has looked great in all the highlights. I think Caleb has done a pretty good job of kind of taking what the defense is giving him. I've been seeing the running backs are getting involved quite a bit. But then, things might break down in 2-minute situations. He hasn't had the full complement at times, like Keenan Allen had a vet day off. They were cycling in different players to get him used to everybody. So just all reports overall have been positive. Even the most skeptical writers like Dane Weeder, who I know Patrick Sheldon probably fainted when he saw that, hey, this is different. Like Caleb's good. Having everybody say that right out of the gate has to make people feel happy. I know I'm kind of shocked still. I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop, but I'm trying to think if there's anything noteworthy that we should talk about. Jonathan Owens is going to the Olympics, so he's not going to be around for a few weeks.
Why are people upset about that? I can't get over that very dirty hit. Dude, it's the old heads. I don't want to categorize all people. Not anyone that's an older Bears fan is feeling that way. But there are people like, well, he shouldn't get time off. He's new to the team. Just stop it. I still can't get over that dirty hit that he had on Justin Fields. I need to get over it. It's a play. It happened quick, but it is what it is. It was interesting to watch a little bit of the Simone Biles documentary on Netflix and see him in there, in a very different light. But I really don't see this guy taking a big role maybe on special teams, right?
Yeah. He's the third safety. Are you concerned? Let me ask you a question. Are you concerned about the lack of movement at the edge position? Because
yes,
Emmanuel Ogbah. Yeah.
Yes. I don't, what are they going to do? They're going to bring back Yannick for what? The thing is, you have Montez Sweat is so good, and there's no denying that. But my biggest issues with this offseason are you didn't do enough with the offensive line. Yes, you did stuff, but you didn't do enough. And the other one is they did nothing with the defensive line, and they're hoping that guys take a step forward. But if they don't, I mean, maybe Austin Booker is way better than his draft position. It's entirely possible. I don't know, but on opposite Montez Sweat, you got nothing, like literally nothing that you double team Sweat. And I mean, so much of what Flus does is predicated on a strong front four. And if it's not there, then you're asking so much more of yes, a talented secondary, a talented linebacking core, but it has me nervous. What about you?
No, it's same here. DeMarcus Walker, I think we're discounting DeMarcus Walker a little bit because he did say in one of his press conferences that he was hurt throughout the year. He pushed himself way too hard in the offseason. He feels a lot better now. And he was still decent last year as an early down edge rusher. He didn't have the gaudy sack totals, but he was great in run defense. But you would like somebody like Yannick where you can bring him in on third down. Maybe he doesn't have to be that 3-down edge rusher opposite Sweat, but he can be somebody who could be a pass rushing specialist to get after the quarterback. I know Jacob Martin was one of the guys that stood out in yesterday's practice, but he's a depth guy. He's the new Rasheem Green this year. So he might hang around, get a couple sacks, but he shouldn't be depended on for anything. Dominique Robinson is still around for some reason. He's bulked up quite a bit. I'm very interested to see what he looks like with his new body. And I just don't think Austin Booker should be counted on for his rookie season. I think there's a ton of upside, and I think he's very, very raw. And if you get, I don't know, maybe like 5 sacks out of him max, like that's a great season in a specialist role coming off the bench. But I also think, Ryan, they're looking at the interior to take a big step too, because everybody's talking about Javon Dexter. Javon Dexter transformed his body. He's a lot leaner, so he wants to get quicker to get after the quarterback. I think with him and Andrew Billings together, that could be a very, very formidable duo, but you're also asking a lot of that area to kind of make up for the other edge positions. So,
but that's the thing, Brendan. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's the could be. Like there's so many questions about this that they're asking so many people to step up from last season, as opposed to bringing in a known commodity of someone that can get after the passer. So that for me, those are the two biggest like question marks / concerns that I have going into this season. I'm worried. I'm worried about that.
Well, at this point, I will say, whether it's Emmanuel Agba, Carl Lawson, Yannick Ngakoue, like are any three of those guys really going to move the needle that much? You're just looking for a guy at this point. So if you get somebody, great. If not, maybe they're also waiting for another in-season trade, because Ryan Poles likes to do that too. But yeah, it's going to be, I totally understand. There's a lot of question marks around that area, and you have a right to be concerned.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see too with, there's always a guy that gets cut that you don't necessarily expect, and then he's looking to have revenge and plays better than he did the previous year, which is why he got cut. So we'll see what happens. Brendan, I don't know about you, but I'm so excited. The Hall of Fame game we're going to watch a lot of backups. But I'm okay with that because I want to watch football. I'm also excited to see the new rules in there, to see Devin Hester, Mongo to go in, yes, sure, Julius Peppers, but he played for the Packers a lot, so I don't love that whole part of it. But he did play well for the Bears in one of our heydays, so I'm excited about that. It's football season, dude. I'm stoked.
Me too. Are you expecting? Well, let me ask you. I'm sure you want to see Caleb Williams in the Hall of Fame game. Are you expecting to see Caleb Williams in the Hall of Fame game?
That's a really, really good question. Does he get a series? You know what I mean? I feel like he needs as much playing time as he possibly can, but like, don't throw that dude in too early because he is too much. Because if Caleb goes down, we don't want Tyson Bagent's season. As much as I liked watching that guy's story last season, that's no, thank you.
Just one bad hit away. No, but I think there's a chance Caleb plays, probably with him pushing for it too. Now the Bears will only have like 4 days of pads before they get to the Hall of Fame game, which is crazy to even think about.
Right.
But if I'm Caleb Williams and I'm trying to build a legacy here, and I know the type of player when it's all said and done, he wants to be a Hall of Fame player who is known for winning. Don't you want to say that you started your career in Canton and then you hope to end it in Canton as well?
Ooh, look at you. It's like you write about this stuff on a regular basis. That was good, dude. That was good. So maybe he'll be quoting you in his book at some point.
Yeah,
right. Who knows? Brendan, this has been an awesome episode, man. I just straight up, dude, I missed you. I missed having you around. I'm glad that I could reel you back in with the introduction video that I think like 4 people got to see, because again, we're not broadcasting on Twitter. We got to discuss as a podcast if we're going to fix that, how we're going to fix that. Anything else before we get to shout outs?
No, it's good to be back. Good to be talking football. I'm going to be going to a couple camp practices in the next couple weeks, so we'll get some better perspectives there. But yeah, it's just it's a great time of year. A lot of hope in the air, which is always dangerous.
Absolutely. For every team, right? For every team. So, Brendan, let's get to your shout outs and let's get out of here, buddy.
All right. My shout outs. I got a chance to meet some really cool Bears content creators a couple weeks ago. Shout out to my guy, Nick, at Just Another Year Chicago. There was a fun golf outing that I was a part of. Didn't get to golf with him specifically. Unfortunately, there were a couple groups, but I did get to golf with Tony, who also is part of the podcast, and one of the best Bears content creators out there, Rashab, who runs to Windy City Productions, as well as brought one of my buddies who's a diehard Bears fan. So just being able to talk shop with them, talk about the Bears, get a good round of golf in, and just be a part of just a really cool community was a lot of fun. So shout out to Nick, shout out to Tony, and shout out to Rashab for organizing the event, for playing some golf. I've been getting into a lot of golf this summer. I've been playing a ton, and so it's fun to kind of mix those two and just have some fun there. But yeah, shout out to those guys, and yeah, I think that's it.
So I got 2 shout outs. The first one goes to Brian Highfill, who got me this vintage Chicago Bears t-shirt. He found it at a retail shop somewhere on the East Coast. I don't know what it was doing out there, but he found it. And so, Brian, thank you so much. He's also one of our resident Vikings fans, so it must have been even harder for him to buy some Bears gear, but he did. So, Brian, thank you to you. The other one goes to my sister, Sarah Dangle. Now, Sarah, she came out for a visit for a week. My kids, Auntie Sarah, they couldn't have been more excited to hang out with Auntie Sarah. And her flight kind of sort of got canceled, but not until about 1 o'clock in the morning. And so she didn't want to wake me and the girls. So she just stayed at the airport and didn't leave until 9:45 the next morning. And so Sarah, I love you so very much. I wish you would have just woke us up, because that sounds absolutely miserable. And so American Airlines, not cool. For all of us here at the Bear Down Chicago podcast, thank you. We are very excited about this season. I think Brendan said it, that there's a sense of optimism that we just haven't seen in a really, really long time, which I think is going to make for more fun Bears content coming your way. We know you can get your Bears content anywhere, and you've chosen to hang out with the Bear Down Chicago podcast, and that means more than any of us can say. So for all of us here, that's Brendan Shagrew, Patrick Sheldon, Logan Bradley, Cam Ellis, Jack Wright. I'm Ryan Dangle, folks. Thank you so very much. And as always, Bear Down, Chicago.